Hi, Peter Singer. It's Animal Rebellion here from Bristol. Thank you so much for being here today with us. We are preparing big action here in the UK and globally, and this is part of what we're doing at the moment. So it's a show called Tell the Truth and Let's Talk About It. And we're going to talk a little bit about ethics today. So thank you so much for being here today. And yeah, hope you're well, and let's just dig in our questions. So we would like to know today what are the progress and the barriers that we face today to recognize animal rights, and how do we differentiate the way we feel towards animals today?
Well, the barriers, I think, are essentially what they've always been, or at least the main ones, that we are in the habit of thinking of animals as not really counting, as not mattering in their own right. And in particular, the fact that most people are eating animals every day, sometimes more than once a day, is a big barrier to them actually rethinking the status of animals, because they realize, or maybe it's in a subconscious way, that if they think too much about these issues, then they may have to change what they're eating. And for some of them, that's unthinkable. They've always been eating this. Their parents and grandparents for aeons back have always been eating meat. And how could that be wrong? How can they change that? So I think that's a large part of the barrier to reconsidering our relationships and attitudes to animals.
Yeah.
And in terms, you asked also about progress. In terms of progress, I think it's significant that despite that, we have made some progress over, let's say, the 45 years since I've been following this issue, or close to 50 years now. In that, you mentioned animal rights. That idea doesn't produce incredulity or laughter as it did 50 years ago. Nobody used the term then, nobody discussed it. And there's now quite a large section of the community that doesn't eat meat, perhaps is completely vegan, not eating animal products at all. And people know about that, so they understand that that's possible, which people doubted 50 years ago. And certainly the idea of being completely vegan, a lot of people thought you wouldn't be able to survive on a vegan diet. The word wasn't known, and there was complete ignorance about that. So we've made a lot of progress in increasing awareness of the possibilities of not using animals as food. And that's an important step forward. Supporting that too, it's not exactly progress, but the greater awareness of climate change and of the impact of meat on climate change didn't exist at all 50 years ago. So that's made more people thinking about what they're eating and the ethics of eating meat.
Yeah. I guess that's how we were created as well. It's just like, because there's this big movement, everyone talks about climate change, but no one really talks about the place of animals, the impacts that animal agriculture has. So I guess that's progress. And in terms of like how animals are treated in on these farms and stuff, do we have have we made some progress with that? Or?
Well, there's much more awareness of that. I myself, when I was a graduate student at Oxford University in 1970, I was 24 years old. I had no idea that millions of animals were locked indoors all their lives. I assumed that animals were out in the fields living reasonably natural lives. Of course, I knew they got slaughtered, but I didn't know how bad their lives were. And now I think it would be difficult for certainly somebody who's university educated and reasonably well aware of what's going on in the world around them, to reach that age without knowing that if they eat animals, most of those animals were spending their lives indoors.
And how did it happen for you? Like, what made you be interested in that subject?
Well, it was an accidental lunch with somebody who did know more than I did, and who wasn't eating meat because of that. So I asked him why he wasn't eating meat, which in 1970 was very unusual. I can't remember having met a vegetarian at up to that point, or
Yeah.
maybe I'd met somebody who was a Hindu or whatever, but I wasn't going to really relate to Hinduism. So the fact that this Canadian philosophy student wasn't eating meat, and when I asked him why, I said he didn't think it was right to treat animals the way the animals that I was then eating over that lunch were being treated, led me to ask him more about how were these animals treated, what's wrong with that. And so for me, that was an eye-opening lunch that led me to look more closely at what I was eating, and then led me to think also about the ethical question of what is the moral status of animals.
Very interesting. Thank you. Do you think, like, in this age and time, we talk about, we're trying to live ethically, and we're trying to be careful with the way we buy things, and we talk a lot about environment. Do you think that eating animals is just like one big part of living ethically, if that makes sense? To live ethically, do we have to do these things? Is it possible? Is it even possible in 2020 to live completely ethically?
Well, I mean, yes, it's possible, but the word completely makes it very difficult, I suppose. And to me, I'm not really that worried about being completely ethical. If you think of a scale going from 0% ethical to 100% ethical, to me, it's not very important whether you're 99.9% ethical or 100% ethical. What's important is that you're, trying at least to be somewhere there at the high end of the spectrum, in the 90s or maybe even in the 80s, and you're not down in the 10s and 20s. So I think what we need to do is to try to move as many people as we can from the 10s and 20s to the 80s or 90s, and not really worry about everybody getting to 99.9 or 100, because that's going to make less difference than moving the mainstream from where they are now to somewhere where they're anyway, well above the 50% mark.
Interesting. And we know that even like personal change, at Animal Rebellion, we're trying not to push people to personal change. We're trying to go to government directly. Do you think that that's a good thing? Do you think that if everyone would change, that would be resolved, or do we need like government intervention?
So it's to use a metaphor that's maybe not very appropriate in this conversation. It's a bit of a chicken and egg situation, isn't it? Can you get governments to act for animals if they don't have the support of at least a very substantial part of the population, whether it has to actually be a majority or not? I think it's a good strategy to go and talk to governments and see what they can do and see to how supportive they are. Governments, at least in the United Kingdom and a number of other countries, will know that there's a reasonably significant percentage of their population that cares about animal welfare. And they'll also know, of course, that most of those people still eat meat, even while saying that they care about animal welfare. But that can still be a basis for progress. So yes, but I think in a way, we need to have both strategies. Excuse me. We need to have people going to government. We need to have people trying to persuade a larger proportion of the population to be concerned about animals, and in particular to be concerned, I think, about factory farming, which in my view is where the majority of the suffering we inflict on animals, or at least the majority of the suffering we inflict on land-based animals, occurs in factory farms. So trying to get people to be more concerned about that is, I think, also an important strategy.
And what changed since you wrote Animal Liberation in the 70s do you think that we've made some progress, like technically, with that? And yeah, what are you hopeful about, for the future, and what are you scared about?
So we've definitely made some change in some countries, not everywhere, but in the European Union, and I suppose this, since the UK is no longer in the European Union, but this still applies to the UK, the law prohibits some forms of keeping animals that was absolutely standard and uniform when I started writing Animal Liberation in 1975. So the standard wire battery cages, which were very small, didn't allow birds room to stretch their wings, didn't contain nesting boxes or anything like that, were absolutely the standard for laying hens. Individual veal stalls that didn't allow the calves to turn around were again standard. They were fed on a diet that deliberately kept them anemic. And for sows as well, the breeding sows, they were also in stalls that couldn't be, they couldn't turn around. They were individual stalls. Those things have been prohibited in a number of jurisdictions, as I say, right across the European Union, the UK, and some states of the United States. California is the biggest, but there are 6 or 7 other states that prohibit these things as well. So yeah, and other countries have made some progress in prohibiting some techniques. So I think that's a good thing, and that's one large area where we can be thankful that some progress has been made. The other progress that has been made is as I mentioned earlier, the development of the plant-based food market, which is now everywhere, whereas it used to be extremely difficult to get anything that was vegan. Now you can find specifically vegan labeled products in supermarkets. You can go to restaurants where they will indicate which meals can be served vegan. So yeah, there's certainly progress, but the downside, and you asked sort of what are my fears, the downside is that there are also large parts of the world where we have not made any progress, or in fact progress has been in reverse, regress, or I'm thinking particularly of countries in East Asia, China and some of its neighbors, that have become more prosperous, and prosperity in itself is a good thing, but the prosperity has brought with it greater demand for meat, and that in turn has brought with it setting up more factory farms, and China has no animal welfare laws that control, no federal laws anyway, no national laws that control what can be done to animals in factory farms. So I think the conditions are absolutely appalling, and there's been very considerable growth in that. So, in that sense, probably more animals are suffering in factory farms today than there were in 1970.
Do you think what we're going through right now is because of that, like because of this expansion of
what do you mean when you say what when you say what we're going through right now?
Well, all this pandemic and the virus.
Well, the coronavirus pandemic, I don't think is related to factory farming. It seems to be related to killing and eating wild animals, pangolins, possibly bats, and to have come from the wet market in Wuhan, which is also an abomination, both from the animal welfare point of view and, of course, from a public health point of view. But it's clear that factory farms pose a risk of pandemics, and the previous pandemic to the COVID-19 one was the swine flu pandemic, which did come out of factory farms, probably out of pig farms in North Carolina, but there's some implication about Mexican pig farms as well. So yeah, experts who look at this say that if you wanted to create new viruses, put 10,000 animals in a shed, stress them a lot so their immune systems are weak, and you'll probably get new viruses developing. And then have humans going through them and catching them and all the rest of it, and then you'll get the viruses transmitted to humans. So factory farming does pose a grave risk of future pandemics.
Yeah, it's the way we treat animals in general, I guess. It's it can't be, nothing good can come out of it, I guess. Yeah. Well, thank you for that. Do you think we'll see one day a plant-based world?
You may. You're a lot younger than I am. I don't think I will. I would hope so, but I really can't guess how long that will take.
Yeah, we'll hope so that we'll see some changes, but yeah, sometimes it's just it's a bit difficult to imagine, like, you know, all the work that it would take. But yeah, we're hopeful that we'll make some progress.
I guess one other factor that I haven't yet mentioned, I've talked about plant-based foods, but I haven't talked about producing meat at the cellular level, which there is a lot of work going into now. Big companies, which, you know, that are worth hundreds of millions of dollars are now engaged in doing this, and they can produce meat at the cellular level. At the moment, the main problem is that it's economic. It's far too expensive. But if you know, a lot of people predict that once you get that on a mass scale, it should be possible to produce the products that we're now used to eating without involving any animals. It would still be meat, and of course that raises a question whether vegans would eat it or not. But the main point, I think, would be that there wouldn't be animal suffering. So that, you know, that is perhaps one way in which maybe within the next few decades we will at least dramatically reduce, if not completely eliminate, using animals for food, and we will do this in a way that eliminates the animal suffering and also eliminates most of the greenhouse gas emissions. So, and of course the pandemic risk as well. So that would be a very important step forward.
Yeah. We've tried a couple. We're lucky enough in here to have like a couple of restaurants that do that. So yeah, I guess it could be a good.
Serving meat, cellular grown meat, really?
Well,
I didn't think it was on the market.
No, not really cellular meat, but you know, like these substitutes and.
Like Impossible Burgers or something like that. Yeah, sure.
So,
yeah, I've tried some of them. Yeah, actually, the Impossible Burger does taste so much like meat to me that I don't really like it. But for people who are used to eating burgers, if you can produce it at a cost that is competitive with the other burgers, then that would be great.
Yeah. Great. And do you think, because we have all the facts, like we know that we have to change this system, do you think we need to know more? Like, is there more things that we need to research? Is there more facts we need to get started on this transition, or what is it that stops us?
Well, I think there's always facts that we need, but the facts that we need now, I think, are not so much about how bad this is for animals and how bad this is for the climate. I think we know those facts. The facts are either, you know, is there a method of producing cellular meat or similar plant-based foods that's economically competitive? And other facts that we need to know is, how do we persuade people to change their diet? Because one of the big things that I come up against, and I would be surprised if you don't, is you talk to people about this and they say, yeah, I know it's horrible. Yeah, I know I really shouldn't be eating meat. You know, it's really bad, but I just like it. And you know, you come to this kind of impasse that they accept all your arguments against it, but they just say they're not going to stop. They want to keep doing it. They don't really care that it's not ethical, or they don't care enough given how much they want to keep eating it. So some facts about the psychology of changing people's habits would be useful here. Are there ways that we are not yet understanding of getting more people to change? Those would be useful facts.
Do you think like marketing and like just talking more about it could help?
Well, it could, but we don't really know. And I think what I'm saying is we need people working in psychology to do experiments, you know, to do trials as to what leads people to change. And actually, I was involved in one of those, which just got published last month, about the effect of a class on meat ethics, that we were able to have a comparison between students who were assigned to a class in which meat ethics was discussed and students who are also philosophy students were assigned to a class that didn't discuss meat ethics. And we were able then to find out what they were buying, what the students were buying at the university's cafeteria. And we did see a drop after the class on meat ethics in the amount of meat purchased. It wasn't a dramatic drop, but it was statistically a significant drop. So, you know, that's the kind of thing that I'm talking about. We need those kinds of careful, controlled experiments to see what works best.
Very interesting. Yeah, I can understand that because I'm French, and in France it's like a very different way of seeing this topic, and it's very difficult. It's a taboo thing to talk about, you know, being vegan over there. It's just like
I thought it was a little better actually. You know, I've been traveling to France as a vegetarian for 48 years or 49 years or something. And when when I went there in the 70s, it was bizarre. I mean, you know, basically it was, when you said I don't eat meat, it was as if you said, you know, I'm spitting on a tricolor or something like that. And also when you told them that you're a vegetarian, they would say, yes, well, we have chicken, or yes, we have fish. But you know, more recently when I've been in France, it hasn't been that bad. There have been more vegetarian and vegan options. And there are radical organizations like L214, which I think are helping to spread the message. So I'm a little, you know, from your perspective, France may be really bad, but it has made progress too. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's just because it's part of the culture, and you know, because it's just like such a social thing for us, and yeah, it's a bit more difficult to be as radical as in here, I guess, as in the UK. But yeah, definitely we made some progress. So that's a good thing. Great. I think we are at half an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, thank you so much. Could you maybe talk to us about what you're working on at the moment, or?
Well, I've just recently finished editing a selection of my essays, previously published essays, nearly all, and that will actually come out in the UK quite soon, on September the 24th. It will come out in the Penguin has a series called Great Ideas, and I'm very pleased that Penguin thinks that being vegan is a great idea. The book is going to be called Why Vegan, and you know, I'm happy that it's coming out, and that's one of the things that I've been working on over the last little while. I'm also working on a range of other issues, including questions about world population. Is the growing population of the world a problem, and if so, what would be an ethical approach to that? So I have a few different projects, and of course I'm going to start teaching at Princeton, even though I'm now in Australia. And normally I would go back to Princeton at this time of year. Because Princeton is teaching all its classes online, I'm going to stay here and teach my class from here online as well.
Okay, well, good luck with that, and we're looking forward to your new book. Thank you very much for being with us today. And where can we find all your info, your website?
Yes, you can go to petersinger.info, and you'll find it there. So
Great.
I hope your listeners or viewers will do that.
Yeah, we'll do that. Thank you very much for being here today, and I hope that you have a lovely day.
Great, thanks. Enjoy your day too.
Bye. And you, bye-bye. Bye.